My brothers and sisters, we can be right and still be wrong. Isn't that true? We can be right and still be wrong. We can have the purest doctrine, the best Bible teaching, the most logical apologetics or rational arguments for faith, and we can still be wrong. Wrong in what matters most. Does it surprise you that there is something that matters matters more than pure doctrine and Bible teaching? There is. It's love. Let us consider again these words from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 1 and 2. Will you read this aloud with me? If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Think of the things that are mentioned here. Fancy speech, understanding of mysteries, amazing insights and knowledge, even prophecy and faith. These things are nothing. Nothing without love. At the very core of everything that our faith is about, at the very, very core is that Jesus is Lord, right? But then there's this is right there with it, that the very center of our faith is love. In fact, Jesus, who is Lord, was asked, what's the greatest commandment? Jesus responded saying, the entirety of the law and the prophets hangs on this. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second one is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. It's a little interesting little phrase that connects those two things. Jesus says, and the second one is like it. In Greek, what it literally means is that it's of the same character. It springs from the same source. It's as if to say, these two, they're coming from the same thing. They're integrally connected. Jesus' response is, love God, love people, and everything else that has to do with faith hangs on those things. This is a series called Ecclesia, which of course is the Greek word for church. And in this sermon series, we've been seeing several ideas over the past few weeks. And there's a breakdown of these things. Some of them I don't quite have. Last week's up there, Pastor Alicia added to this list, church is about community, not individuals. But these are some of the things that we've been looking at and talking about. And each week we've been having this shape that says church is about this, not this. And these are some of them that we've seen. But there's this one idea that I've repeated every week, and I've wanted to be very careful about it, and it's that first one there. Church is about who we are as a people together, not something we do or somewhere we go on Sundays. Again, the Greek word ekklesia, which translates to English as church, it means the called out ones. We are those who have been called out of the dominant stream of society, The mainstream that flows in terms of power, consumption, individualism, and coercion. We've been called out of that and brought into the way of Christ, the way of humility, simplicity, community, and sacrifice. We are the called out ones, the church. And today we're going to dive into a new theme. The church is about this, not this. And today our topic is the church is about love, not being right. My best friend, Brian, he is the best arguer that I know. Don't get in an argument with Brian. It doesn't matter if you're right. He will make you start to believe that you're wrong somehow. Not only that, but he'll make you feel like a fool while he's doing it. He just has it. He knows your buttons. He knows how to get under your skin. Laura's smiling up here because she knows that he can do that somehow. And he came to visit me while I was living in Costa Rica at one point. He was going to visit for a few weeks, and he ended up staying for 6 months. Sometimes Costa Rica will just do that to you. So he got a job there teaching at a English-speaking Christian school there in Costa Rica. And it was a very conservative staff that was there. And my friend isn't really all that conservative. He got into a discussion with another gal who was there who taught history, I should say, at the International Christian School. And they were in this discussion. I believe it was about six-day creation, and they had differing perspectives on this. And I should also say this, she was a pretty stout woman. And she was kind of agrarious in nature, strong opinions and very vocal about them. But their argument about this thing went from discussion to argument, and it started to kind of like escalate a little bit until it got to this place where I don't even know how this conversation gets to this, but she ultimately kind of blurted out something, and I asked him this week about, like, how did it get to this? And he's like, I can't remember. I only remember, these moments and how crushed I felt in the moment. But it got to this place where she blurted out something about him not being man enough for something like this, and he responded, no, but you are. Zinger. He got her, right? He got her. You can win and still lose. I wish I had my phone here because I would bring up the text message that he sent me. So I was looking for more details on this story, and he said he remembers the moment that he looked at her after having said what he said, and he could tell that it really penetrated to the heart, and she was hurt, and how low his spirit felt also in that moment. We can win and still lose. I think there are 3 arenas from which we should consider the foundation of love as what it means for us to be the church. And I'm not going to say anything this morning that's wildly earth-shattering. It's probably nothing I'll say will really surprise you this morning. These will just be faithful reminders of things that you know. And it's important to do that, to be reminded of these things. So 3 arenas for love. First, the first one is this: love one another. John 13:34 and 35, Jesus gives his disciples a new command. He tells them, love one another as I have loved you. By this will all people know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Of course we should love one another. What's especially unique about this passage here in John, I think, is that it says everyone will know that Christ is in us because of the way we love each other. It's interesting how the way we love each other expresses Christ to onlookers. It stands to reason then also that if we don't express love well to one another, people will also recognize that Christ is not in us. Glenn Marshall, an author, wrote these words: "The world has seen too many petty disputes over non-essential doctrine. They've watched venom spew from our lips against each other. They've seen churches split over the most insignificant matters. They've witnessed how we treat one another with disrespect and ridicule, and then go back to our churches to sing, 'Blessed be the tie that binds.' They've seen the way we work against each other while claiming to believe a creed that speaks of the communion of saints. The world sees all this as hypocrisy, and they are not wrong." Brothers and sisters, we don't have to agree on everything, all right? Take a deep breath. It's okay. We don't have to agree on everything, and we know we don't. It's true. But even the way we disagree with one another matters for the sake of the mission of God's kingdom. How might things have been different if my friend Brian and his Christian sister there at that school had simply respected one another's differing perspectives on creation? Lines of communication may have stayed open, could have learned from one another, instead of ending up with hurt feelings and a broken relationship. I love Paul's advice to the church of Ephesus. He says, "Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace." Tertullian, a second century church leader, he reported that the pagans around in the town where he lived had been talking about the Christians and recognizing and seeing how they love one another. His interpretation of that was that it was the single most potent reason for the effective growth of the church in the second century. That onlookers would look and see how well the Christians loved one another and engaged them. Our first arena, then, love is the foundation of our faith. The first arena, love one another. By this will everyone know that Christ is in us. The second arena is not just to love one another in our church body, but to love others, right? By loving well and tangibly beyond the walls of our church, beyond the borders of who we are as a people. Loving people who aren't of the Christian faith, who don't believe in Jesus, and loving them without an agenda. What might happen if churches all over the place, instead of trying to point out what's wrong with society and what's wrong with other people and all those out there in the society or in the world, what if our main objective was loving and serving our neighborhoods and communities, in particular people who are having the hardest time? After all, Jesus declared, right? Jesus declared that the main thing that faith hangs on is to love God and love our neighbors. I'm going to have a moment this morning of lucid vulnerability with you. I don't feel like you guys are the morality police. You're not finger wavers. I love that. I'm so glad. You walk a great line that's difficult between being holy and standing for holiness while also being grace-filled when you come into context with other places that aren't this way. And I appreciate that about you very much as a church. But what I'm most afraid of here at Crossroads is that we will do our fair share of nice things. You know, I love it when you guys all come over to the parsonage, come over to our house, and we have a meal together. I love it. See you enjoying one another and laughing and caring for one another. It's beautiful. I love last night being able to be together and be thankful and to express that, and then also the way you give and to take care of a sister in a foreign land who's doing ministry there. I love that stuff. I love it when we worship together. I love these times. I love singing with you and sharing the word. I am afraid, however, that we'll do all these nice things and seldom get to pushing our love, God's love, beyond the borders of who we are ourselves as a faith community. And that concerns me. And that kind of sounds rude to say. Sounds perhaps maybe like I think that you guys don't love your neighbors. I know you do. I always remember the one thing that Charlie Roberson would always say to me before he and Debbie moved away. He would say, Jake, there are more people doing more things that you don't know about in ministry and caring for people out there. And I'm certain that is true, and those things are good, really good. I validate those in every way. But I can't help but still think that there needs to be a way that we as a community, as a people, band together to express God's love beyond our walls. As Pastor Alicia preached last week, church is about community, not individuals. And in that vein, as long as we only express the love of God as individuals in our unique circumstances, it will have only isolated moments of impact. But when the church can exist as a people of the radical love of God, tangibly expressed in sacrificial service, then we'll really be bearing fruit, bearing faithful witness to God's love in the world. My gut tells me, maybe even conviction, maybe it's even spiritual conviction tells me that if we don't, as a people, find consistent, meaningful ways to love humbly out and about, then our faith will just sort of wither in ways. It will weaken. And I don't know how to get us there. I'm working on that. And I don't know how that makes you feel this morning that I've just said things like that. I know you're tired. I know that you are busy people. You might be thinking, Pastor, I don't have a single other spare hour in my week to add anything. I feel that way too. And if your schedule is filled up already because you're busy loving people and serving and doing wonderful things, then I'm not talking to you. But if your schedule is filled up without, and there's no space in there for loving service, I feel the need as your pastor to tell you that you need that. You need that. When I was being ordained, in the ceremony with over 100 pastors and elders standing around those of us who were ordinands, and we were kneeling at the altar, and a very holy person would come to each of us and lay hands on us to anoint us. And when this person got to me and laid hands on me and prayed over me, one of the things that they said was, "Take thou authority to preach the word and to administer the sacraments." I usually think of of being a pastor as a service job. And it is. It's much more a service position than it is an authority position. But every once in a while, I just need to lay claim to that ordination. And by the authority vested in me in the Church of the Nazarene to preach the Word of God, brothers and sisters, I wholeheartedly believe that if we don't find the time and the ways to serve and love meaningfully and tangibly beyond our faith community, then our new life in Christ becomes just kind of tired. Our strength atrophies. The salt loses its saltiness. Our light grows dim and faint until we are no longer a city on a hill that cannot be hidden. I'm not just saying that it weakens our testimony to the world. It does that. But when we don't carve the time to serve as a people in love, it weakens the faith that we have in our own souls. Strange how that happens. Like a flightless bird. What good is it to be a bird if the bird's not flying? It might as well be something else. If we have faith that can move mountains and have not love, we're nothing. And of course, it goes beyond just like having that general feeling of love towards other people. Love is to be expressed. As James writes, right? Do not merely listen to the word and fool yourselves. Do what it says. This calling to love and serve humbly. We've got to find ways as a people that we get out and enact it. A couple sentences later, James says, pure and undefiled religion is this, to look after orphans and care for widows. In the very next chapter, he talks about faith, indeed saying, faith by itself is, if it is not accompanied by actions, is dead. Interestingly, James, he's more challenging on this point than I am. I'm saying that if we don't do it, then our faith begins to wither, right? He's saying faith, if it's not being done, is dead. It is already. So, love God. Love one another. And we've got to find meaningful, tangible ways to love beyond ourselves and our faith community. And I'm not sure what expression we'll have for that just yet. But I'm working on that. I believe it's important both for our faithful testimony to the world and also for the faith that is within our own souls, the vitality of our souls as the people of God. The final arena that I want to note today, where love can be the foundation of our faith, it's really a subcategory of loving others, but it's the most challenging one, and it's especially important. It might be the greatest single indicator of our spiritual maturity. And Jesus highlights it specifically as well. And so I thought I should this morning. And it's to love our enemies. Matthew 5, verses 43 to 48 says, you have heard that it was said, love your neighbors and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even the pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Have you read the book Les Miserables? No, me neither. I mean, let's get serious. It has like 2,000 pages. Why would any of us do that? Oh, Mary, of course. Yeah, should have known. All right, I haven't read it either. But I did watch 2 movies based on that book, right? One was in 1998 and one was in 2012. And in the book, or in the movie, the main character, Jean Valjean, he's been released from prison after 19 years of being in there. And no one will give him lodging because he's an ex-convict. But the bishop of a small town sees past that and offers him dinner and a place to stay for the night. And Jean Valjean repays him by stealing his silver in the middle of the night. And here's what happens in response to that.
Is anybody there? So we'll use wooden spoons. I don't want to hear anything more about it.
I'm sorry to disturb you,
You caught him.
but I had my eye on this man.
Thank God. I'm very angry with you, Jean Valjean.
What happened to your eye, Monseigneur?
Didn't he tell you he was our guest last night?
Oh, yes. After we searched his knapsack and found all this silver, he claimed that you gave it to him.
Yes. Of course I gave him the silverware. But why didn't you take the candlesticks? That was very foolish. Madame Gillot, fetch the silver candlesticks. They're worth at least 2,000 francs. Why did you leave them? Hurry. Monsieur Valjean has to get going. He's lost a lot of time. Did you forget to take them?
Are you saying he told us the truth?
Of course. Thank you for bringing him back. I'm very relieved.
Release him.
You're really letting me go?
Didn't you understand the bishop?
Madame Gillot, offer these men some wine. They must be thirsty.
Thank you.
And don't forget. Don't ever forget. You've promised to become a new man.
Promise. Why are you doing this?
Jean Valjean, my brother, you no longer belong to evil. With this silver, I've bought your soul. I've ransomed you from fear and hatred. And now I give you back to God.
I love that clip. Sorry about the technical glitches, but you get the idea. I remember crying at that clip when I was 21 years old in the theater, watching it in the theater, and just being gripped by this lovely portrayal of radical Christian love. The bishop would have been totally within his rights to press charges, but instead chooses to love radically. It gives imagery to what Paul is saying to the church in Rome in chapter 12. He writes to a church that is being badly persecuted in ways that we never imagined will happen to us here. He writes these words: "Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge. My dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, "It is mine to avenge. I will repay," says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. It was always concerning to me that this verse said, "You'll heap burning coals on his head." That just seemed kind of like the wrong idea for what Paul was trying to get at. And if we understand it, actually what's taking place here is that it's symbolic of a purification kind of thing. It's not really like mean coals burning you. It's much like when Isaiah, in the book of Isaiah, when the angel comes and places burning coals on the lips of Isaiah to purify his mouth because he was a man of unclean lips. The same kind of thing is what's being expressed here. So it's very much this idea. But I mean, if your enemy's hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. Do not be overcome by evil. Overcome evil with good. I read the account of a 2nd century house church recently that was near Carthage. Where the entire church community, at least all those who were meeting, who had gathered for this worship, the Roman soldiers came in and arrested them all, carried them off away so that they would be imprisoned, ultimately to be used as entertainment, as a spectacle in the gladiator games of Carthage. You can read about this if you're interested in Passion of Saints Perpetua and Felicitas. Remarkable story. It's one of the oldest and most notable early Christian extra-biblical texts and contains the actual prison diary of a young mother and leader of the church, Perpetua. And it also contains other eyewitness accounts of the events that took place from this time from other Christians. And so I don't have time to go into the amazing details of this story this morning, but these Christians, after being arrested and when their time came to face the gladiators and the crowds and their captors, they went out there having chosen to radically express love in the midst of that arena. So much so with their gestures and with their poise, so much so that they were, the beauty of the way they handled themselves in the arena turned many of the people in the crowd against what was being done to them. One of the guards who had been who had guarded them throughout the week leading up to that event ultimately left his time and left his life there as a Roman soldier and became joined to the church. And they were martyred brutally, unjustly, as they offered love to the people in the surrounding area. Martyred in the most cruel and worst ways. And it gave testimony. And we can read about that still today, and it gives testimony to us. And we won't likely see that kind of persecution. Even a crazed instance like what happened this last week with the gunman on the church. He wasn't persecuting a church. There were other things involved there, but there are plenty of people, even in our society, who just really kind of have it out for the church, not with this same kind of violence. A guy like Bill Maher comes to mind, and these are people that, when I hear them talk, I feel this tenseness coming inside me, and I want to battle and defend, and we can find all kinds of spiritually weak Christians, not just defending the faith, but getting aggressive, saying awful things towards atheists and different places. You'll find it on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all kinds of other places. But I'm convinced that the best thing that we can do as Christians is to quietly repay evil with good. We may lose the argument, because just as there are ways to win and still lose, there are ways to lose and still win. To quietly repay evil with good. Love God. Love one another. Love others. Love our enemies. It matters much less that we be right and vindicated in our rightness. What God wants for us is to love even when we are being wronged as we are right. In conclusion, I think the best thing that we could do to close our time in worship together, rather than sing a song together, there just wasn't a song that really captured this essence. But I would like for us to stand and repeat out loud together the entire 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians, the love chapter. And so would you stand? We'll say this together. At the conclusion, I'll say it's the word of the Lord, and you'll respond saying, "Thanks be to God." Let's read. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child, thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. This is the word of the Lord. And let's add a benediction to the conclusion of this service. Receive these words from Ephesians 3, verses 16 through 19. May God strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ. And to know this love that surpasses understanding, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. May you go in that fullness. His grace and his peace be with you.